A live look right now in Herndon, Virginia. This is just outside our nation's capital. We are awaiting Donald Trump. He is due to take part in a town hall in that battleground state. It's a big one. National defense, care for veterans, fighting Islamic terror, among the topics. We're going to bring you that just as soon as it begins.
While we await that event, now here was Trump on Saturday talking about the Clintons' relationship with each other.
Hillary Clinton's only loyalty is to her financial contributors and to herself. I don't even think she's loyal to Bill. You want to know the truth. And really, folks, really, why should she be, right? Why should she be?
Marianne Marsh, former advisor to Secretary Kerry, and Kristen Soltis Anderson, Republican pollster and columnist for the Washington Examiner. How you doing, ladies? Good morning to both of you. Kristen.
Good morning, Bill.
I don't know. It's just last week we were talking about Howard Dean and cocaine. We're talking about sex tapes. I mean, this election's got it all. I would venture to guess at the moment that nothing is off limits. Taxes, relationships, and on and on. Where are you on this?
Well, you know, when Donald Trump was running in the primary, he made the case, look, I'm the only one that's going to have the guts to go there on some of these issues. So Republican voters knew what they were getting when they were picking Donald Trump. They knew that this was the sort of thing that might be on the table. But a poll out just this morning has 56% of voters saying they think it's inappropriate for Trump to bring up the affairs, including 62% of women. This is just him talking about things that are not the issues that matter to most voters. And so as you were talking about earlier, when Trump is on the issues is when he's the best. You know, think about 2 weeks earlier when he began to retake ground from Hillary Clinton in the polls. It's because he wasn't in the headlines for any of these outrageous statements. I think by focusing on this, he risks making Hillary Clinton look like the victim and putting her back in a place where voters like her more.
Does she defend herself on this, or does she ignore it? What do you think her strategy should be?
Well, I think it depends on the venue. I mean, if it's right now, I don't think she needs to say anything about it. But does he say something at the debate next Sunday? I think that's the question. And so when you look at Donald Trump, his whole candidacy is based on winning. And he's not right now. To Kristen's point, he's behind in the polls. We know now that he lost at least almost $1 billion in 1 year alone. He says he has a winning temperament, and when he acts like this and says the things he said on Saturday night and elsewhere, that's not winning. And I think what you're seeing now is the pressure is getting to Donald Trump. He realizes this race is starting to slip away from him, and as I've said on this show and elsewhere many weeks ago, if Donald Trump ever thought he was losing this race, he was going to try to take her with him, and I think we're about to see that.
All right, so here was Trump again on stamina and the physical demands of the office when he went this.
She's supposed to fight all of these different things, and she can't make it 15 feet to her car. Give me a break. Give me a break. Give me a break. She's home resting right now. She's getting ready for her next speech, which is going to be about 15 minutes, and it's going to be in 2 or 3 days.
That was kind of like the Ben Carson moment from the primary battle. Kristen, is she vulnerable on health? What's the effect of that aspect of Trump's presentation, let's call it?
So there was some polling that came out about 2 weeks ago around the time of the 9/11 memorial when she did have some trouble sort of getting into the van, where there were voters saying, look, I am concerned. I am concerned that, you know, there was actually a very morbid poll question that asked, do you think that these candidates would make it through the first term? And there's a sizable portion of voters who think that it's possible that whoever we elect might not make it through the first term of their presidency. So this is the sort of thing that I actually think does make voters concerned. You know, these candidates make voters a little bit anxious. Both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, if you ask voters, they say the idea of them being in the White House makes them anxious. The idea that you could vote for someone and then they might not make it through the first term is something that certainly I think keeps a lot of voters up at night. With that said, again, it's not about the issues, which I think means that it's not a strong message.
Okay, listen, there were so many headlines over the weekend. Here's another one. Leaked audio of Hillary Clinton from February talking about basement dwellers, Bernie Sanders supporters, when she said this.
They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. If you're feeling that you're consigned to being a barista or, some other job that doesn't pay a lot and doesn't have much of a ladder of opportunity attached to it, then the idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing.
How do you defend that, Marianne? What do you think the impact of that is?
It's pretty easy, frankly, and it's been, I'm really disappointed in the media, many outlets, who just looked at the top line of this and didn't look at this entire quote. And there are a lot of apologies and retractions due here. The fact is, she was analyzing why millennials feel this way. They are children of the recession. They watch their parents lose their homes, lose their marriage, lose everything, and they have struggled along the way. So she was empathizing with them and explaining why they think about politics the way they do, and she is spot on right about it.
Okay,
and
so
that's why she's offered plans to make college more affordable.
They had an event, right? They canceled that today, right?
That's about, you know what that is, Bill? It's far more efficient for Bernie Sanders to go out and campaign on his own and Hillary Clinton to go campaign on her own with 36 days to go and states to win.
Come on, Marianne.
That's what that's about.
That's thin.
No, fact. Fact, Bill.
Fact.
Fact. Check it out.
Last word.
I think that in some ways that her read of the millennial generation is a little bit wrong, because I think a lot of them don't just want free college and free health care. I know it's kind of easy to demonize millennials as just wanting free stuff.
They'd like
but a lot
job.
of the research I've done, they'd like a job. They'd like ways to pay for college on their own. They'd like health care to be affordable. It doesn't mean they want just handouts. And I think this idea that you can win young voters with handouts is the wrong approach.
I'm out of town. We had a lot to get to. Thank you, ladies, to both of you. Marianne, thanks in Boston. Kristen, thanks to you in D.C. Melissa.
So we are waiting right now for Donald Trump at a town hall in Virginia. The event coming on the heels of a New York Times report about Trump's tax return from more than 20 years ago. The report getting a lot of attention. But did the New York Times break the law by running the story? The Trump campaign certainly thinks so, saying, quote, "The only news here is that the more than 20-year-old alleged tax document was illegally obtained. A further demonstration that the New York Times, like establishment media in general, is an extension of the Clinton campaign, the Democratic Party, and their global special interests." Judge Andrew Napolitano is a Fox News senior judicial analyst and a sage word on all things legal. Tell me, did the New York Times break the law?
No, the New York Times did not break the law, but someone apparently did. We don't know who, because we don't know who sent it to the New York Times. Look, a tax return, once filed, is the property of the government, and it has the highest degree of protection of any category of documents. So somebody broke the law by getting this partial return into the hands of the New York Times. But once in the hands of a professional media person or organization, if the material in the document is material to the public interest, like the Pentagon Papers or the Snowden exposures or Donald Trump's tax returns, then the publication of the contents of the document is protected, meaning they can't be sued and they can't be prosecuted. I understand the Trump campaign's frustrations.
Yeah. It's interesting.
But the law is not on their side.
The New York Times kind of wants to have it both ways, because if you think back, there were those emails that related to ClimateGate and Hillary Clinton. They didn't print those, and their defense was that they thought it was stolen documents. That they would be breaking the law by printing it.
I'm smiling because they know that that's not a defense. They were the defendants, the New York Times, in the Pentagon Papers case, which is the seminal case in 1974, unanimous Supreme Court opinion saying if it's material to the public interest and a publisher gets it, doesn't matter how the publisher gets it, the publisher can publish it. So the New York Times folks know that. They obviously were showing their hand in this Trump versus Clinton race by publishing what was protected for him, but not publishing what they thought was protected for her.
In terms of him breaking the law, not breaking the law, as you look at the tax lawyer, I know you're not a tax lawyer, but he didn't break the law.
It does.
In fact, he followed it.
Yes, that is correct. Look, the tax code, I'm holding my hand above the floor, so it's 4 feet thick, 70,000 pages of regulations. But they were either written by the Congress or their revenue rulings by the IRS itself, telling taxpayers what to do and how to file. Donald Trump hired people to show him how to take advantage of laws that Congress enacted. So if you have, the numbers are staggering, $1 billion loss in 1995, you can take that loss against your taxes in the 3 preceding years or the 15 years following. Now, Can the Times conclude that he paid no income taxes whatsoever in the past 20 years? No.
They don't know.
They
Yeah,
would
they don't
need
know.
to see all of his returns in there. Can we conclude that he properly utilized the $1 billion loss? No. We need to see all of his tax returns.
Yeah.
But on its face, can a person do what the Times said Donald Trump did lawfully? The answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah, I guess the outrage is that he didn't pay more than he owes. I don't know how many people out there in the audience pay more. Do you tip Uncle Sam? I try not to tip Uncle Sam.
Some
it's
people,
a course of business.
Some people make judgment calls in favor of the IRS. But look, there's at least one Supreme Court opinion right on point that says no one should pay, quote, a nickel more than he owes. And in America, the taxpayer tells the government what the taxpayer owes, rather than in other countries where the government tells the taxpayer what the taxpayer owes.
There you go.
But you can see why he's under 20 years of audits, because of this type of proper but very sophisticated and with huge numbers use of the tax code.
Yeah, I think that probably he lost a lot of the people in the audience in terms of just following the story. When they said lost $1 billion, people can't picture what that means.
Right,
Anything
right.
that's said after that is kind of lost in the
now
noise.
it's political. Now it's for him to explain it so that the public can understand it.
Or just turn to the issues.
Right.
Or just turn to his issues.
Right.
That, you could also do that. Judge Napolitano, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Melissa.
All right, Bill, back to you.
Exactly right about that. 18 minutes now before the hour. We've been watching the hall here. This is Herndon, Virginia. It is slightly west of the nation's capital, where Donald Trump will be any moment now. We were told the event would start at 9, then we were told 10, so we're kind of in standby right now. The fallout, meanwhile, continues over this New York Times article revealing part of Trump's tax returns from 1995. That was 21 years ago. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie on the Sunday program saying the article shows that Trump did nothing wrong or illegal, and he believes the story will actually help Trump's campaign.
There's no one who's shown more genius in their way to maneuver around the tax code and to rightfully use the laws to do that. And he's already promised in his tax plan to change many of these special interest loopholes and get rid of them, so you don't have this kind of situation. This is a guy who, when lots of businesses went out of business in the early 1990s, he fought and clawed back to build another fortune, to create tens of thousands of more jobs. And this is actually a very, very good story for Donald Trump.
So Howard Kurtz now, Fox News media analyst, host of Media Buzz. Howie, how you doing? Good morning. Good morning
Great.
to
Good
you.
morning, Bill.
You had a packed program on Sunday. You had Kellyanne Conway on from the Trump team. You had Brian Fallon on from the Clinton team. Take the Trump team first. How are they characterizing the reaction now to the tax deal and everything else that happened the last 48 hours, literally?
Well, as you just saw, Bill, Chris Christie and Rudy Giuliani both using the word genius to describe this tax story. I think it's ingenious on their part to try to spin this in a way that's positive. Now, look, as you've been observing this morning, that Donald Trump broke no laws if indeed he used that nearly $1 billion loss to wipe out his taxes for the next 15 or 18 years. So I don't think it's quite the bombshell that some of the media are presenting it as, but it's not a great story to have come out a month before the election when, you know, you're running against a rigged system, and it shows that Donald Trump, at the very least, took advantage of a rigged system.
Brian Fallon was on from the Clinton team, too. Did you get a chance to talk to him about the basement dwellers and Bernie Sanders?
I didn't get a chance to talk to him about that. He had a lot to say, as you might imagine, about both this New York Times tax story, as well as, you know, the other things that Donald Trump has been keeping in the news, the 3 a.m. tweets about the former Miss Universe, Saturday night talking about whether or not Hillary Clinton might have not been loyal to Bill Clinton. I mean, Trump has a way of driving the news agenda every single day, but some of his own people, leaving aside what we saw Chris Christie say, seem a little exasperated at the fact that he is using up a lot of the media oxygen on issues that are not necessarily going to help him win the presidency, pivoting away unintentionally perhaps from jobs, taxes, and terrorism.
Yeah, what is your sense now, mainstream media observations? How have they played this? The New York Times revelation? What are you picking up on that, Howard, as you watch this?
It seems to me that from the second the New York Times put this story online on Saturday night, Bill, this has been treated as an absolute bombshell, something Donald Trump didn't want made public and all of that. Let's remember, all we're seeing here is in 1995, at a time when his casinos were in trouble and Atlantic City was a mess, Donald Trump lost a lot of money and declared it on his taxes. So that alone, I don't think, is a game changer for this campaign. I do think the fact that he is showing a little bit more of an undisciplined side when it comes to, extending this Miss Universe thing that Hillary Clinton brought up into debate into a 5-day story, and now concentrating on the Clinton marriage, which, you could argue almost everyone in the country who was alive in 1992 or 1998 knows about the Clinton sex scandals. It is hard for me to see how this helps Donald Trump and how it doesn't take him off his core message, which is we need less government. Hillary Clinton is a disaster. She's been around forever and all of that. The Clinton team is loving the last week.
Well, my sense is what Trump should do is say what he's often said. He doesn't like to pay taxes, and then pivot and talk about what his tax plan would do if he were president for middle-class Americans.
Right. Instead, he's lashing out the New York Times, understandably. It is against the law to publish this, although as Judge Napolitano observed earlier, the Times didn't do anything to obtain this. It came in the mail. Somebody obviously broke the law in the process. But in order to do that, Bill, Trump would have to acknowledge that he didn't pay taxes. He doesn't want to do that. He's not denying it. He's not contesting it. But, I think a lot of Americans would say he's a businessman. That's what businessmen are supposed to do, unless he did something that was questionable or abusive. But this idea of just, taking a big loss off your taxes, anybody who loses money on a house or a stock can do that. Donald Trump obviously plays at a much higher level.
Last point on all this. When you think about Trump supporters, do they trust the media in general? When they see a story from the New York Times, do they dismiss it outright? Or is it still, Howie, that middle 8 to 10 to 12% of undecided voters, perhaps independent voters, that would be looking at this more carefully? Or do they simply say, that's just what you do?
Trump supporters, and I hear from them every hour on Twitter and elsewhere, despise the media, think the media are not fair, think the media are totally favoring Hillary Clinton, and pretty much discount just about anything negative that is reported about Donald Trump, even if it's a story on Donald Trump's own words. But you hit the key point. It's this, undecided 4, 5, 6, 7%, particularly in the swing states, Ohio, Iowa, Florida, Colorado, Virginia, that are going to decide this election. They might be feeling a little more doubt about Donald Trump as one story after another hits. There's another one today by the AP about making sexist comments during his years at The Apprentice. None of these stories by themselves, are going to prevent Trump from winning, but the drip, drip, drip effect is the media clearly
that's why
creating a problem.
That's why Tuesday night matters, and that's why Sunday night matters in St. Louis.
Howard,
thank you.
I'll be in St. Louis. Good to see you, Bill.
You bet. Howard Kurtz there from Washington. Thank you, Howie. Melissa. He made about young voters who support Bernie Sanders. This, as we await Donald Trump in Virginia, what will he say about the tax documents leaked to the New York Times? Will he say anything? We're on standby. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Bill Hemmer. Hope you had a great weekend. Nice to see you one final time, right?
Oh, yeah. Today, my last day here. Hopefully, I'll be back after that. We'll see. I'm Melissa Francis in for Martha McCallum here. Trump about to address retired military veterans in Virginia as Clinton scrambles to appease Sanders supporters after the release of bombshell audio tapes. Here's a sample. Listen.
They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. If you're feeling that you're consigned to, being a barista or, some other job that doesn't pay a lot and doesn't have much of a ladder of opportunity attached to it, then the idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing.
Stephen Hayes, senior writer, Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor. Steve, how are you? Good morning to you.
Morning, Bill.
I'm going straight to Starbucks. That's my future. The Clinton team is saying this is no insult. How do you hear it?
Yeah, I don't think this is that big deal, honestly. If you listen to what she's saying, I think she's characterizing Bernie Sanders' supporters. If it had come out during the Democratic primary, maybe the Sanders supporters would have taken greater insult. I can see why they would say that this means she's relegating us to relatively unimportant jobs, the way that she's describing it and characterize it. But I don't think this is a huge deal in the broader
when she
debate.
talks about a ladder of opportunity for young people in America, that can be an indictment against the policies of the last 8 years.
Well, now that's where I think this is a bigger story, is if she's in effect saying that President Obama hasn't done enough to provide that ladder of opportunity. That's a phrase that he likes to use. But again, she made that argument pretty explicitly during the Democratic primary debates. You think back to some of those times on stage with she and Bernie Sanders, and you listen to their discussion and you wonder, why are you running to succeed President Obama and build on his policies if they have been so ineffective?
Well, on Trump now, we're waiting to see if he says anything. Do you think he takes on this tax issue at this event or not, Steve?
You know, it's the biggest thing in the news. Trump usually doesn't run away from a big story, so I would expect that he would say something about it. If we are to judge from the spin that we're hearing from his advisors, both Rudy Giuliani and Chris Christie, he'll argue that this was a genius move, that he avoided paying these taxes because the laws allowed him to do so, and by doing that, he was a genius.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of how this is heard by those who have not yet made up their mind?
Yeah, I don't think it affects Trump's base much. I mean, they've basically tuned this out. They hear it's from the New York Times. They don't care much. I do think it has the potential to affect independent voters, people who haven't made up their mind, as you say, because not just because of the possibility, and it is just a possibility at this point, that he may have done something wrong by not paying his taxes, but also because of $1 billion loss. I mean, remember, the key argument, or one of the key arguments to the Trump candidacy, has been that he's a genius businessman and he can do for the country what he's done for his own businesses. And then you have $1 billion loss operating, largely from casino failures or problems. I think people will hear that, and it puts a little dent in his claim to be a brilliant businessman.
Yeah, let's look at the polling here. This four-way race with Jill Stein and Gary Johnson included. Actually, this is the two-way race. I see her up 5. This is the four-way race now, where she's up 43 to 40%. I still see this election up in the air. A lot of these states are well within the margin of error. Do you see it that way as well?
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the most interesting developments has been this movement of millennial voters from Hillary Clinton to Gary Johnson. We've seen that over the past couple of months. We know that she had trouble connecting with millennial voters during the Democratic primary. To be sure, they supported Bernie Sanders in overwhelming numbers. The question is, going back to the audio you played at the beginning, did they hear that in the way that the Trump campaign is suggesting they ought to? Do millennial voters hear that and say, wow, she's really running us down. She's denigrating work like baristas. She's saying we live in our basement. And if that's the case, makes her job of recovering those millennial voters who were a key part of the Obama coalition that much more difficult.
In a race that is this close, Steve, in a lot of these battleground states, you saw the meter move a little bit after debate number 1 in her favor. It could move again after number 2 and number 3. But what about tomorrow night in Virginia with the vice presidential debate? I'm intrigued by it. Am I the only one with Tim Kaine and Mike Pence?
You and me. That we might be the only two. Look, as a guy who wrote a book about Vice President Cheney, I'm very interested in the role that a vice president plays and the role that vice presidential debates play in our elections. I think this has the potential to be more meaningful than VP debates in the past, in part because people are so dissatisfied with the candidates at the top of the ticket. So if you don't like Hillary Clinton, or you don't like Donald Trump, or you don't like both of them, which is a good chunk of the American electorate, you're looking at somebody like a Tim Kaine, like a Mike Pence, to say, what else are we going to see from this ticket, from this governing package? And particularly for Mike Pence, who I think is going to be making arguments that conservatives have wanted to hear from the Republican ticket for a long time and maybe haven't heard as much from Donald Trump.
All right, good deal. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate your insight there. Steve Hayes there in D.C. Thanks, Melissa.
Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton heading to Ohio as she deals with the fallout from those leaked comments about Sanders supporters. Rich Edson is live in Chappaqua, New York. So what is Hillary Clinton up to today, Rich?
Hi, good morning, Melissa. And remember, just when you talk about those comments from Bernie Sanders and the reaction to it, Bernie Sanders essentially saying that Hillary Clinton is absolutely correct in her assessment. Donald Trump had tried to drive a wedge and say that Bernie Sanders supporters should stop backing Hillary Clinton because of what he said, what she said, the example of a barista living in their basement. And she's taking a page out of Bernie Sanders' playbook here, and according to a campaign aide, will be going after 2 corporations in Ohio talking about the economy. She'll talk about Wells Fargo and Mylan Pharmaceuticals. Wells Fargo, of course, criticized by Congress, bipartisan over the past couple of weeks, for opening up unauthorized accounts. Mylan Pharmaceuticals, they make EpiPens. The price of EpiPens has increased by hundreds of dollars over the last several years, and they caught bipartisan heat from Congress last week as well. And so Hillary Clinton, according to a campaign aide, will talk about how the government and consumers can take action against what they're calling corporate bad actors. This, in keeping with the same vein as Hillary Clinton and her campaign continue talking about Donald Trump's 1995 tax returns, as reported in the New York Times.
His statement that he gave to the New York Times was what they call in the industry a non-denial denial. Talked about all types of other forms of taxes that he pays, but it didn't deny that he hasn't been paying federal income tax the last few years. I think that the secret is out, that this report is a bombshell because it exposes the real reasons why Donald Trump has been holding back his tax returns.
Those tax returns, at least a few pages of them, showing that he deducted hundreds of millions of dollars in losses as a real estate developer. Those deductions are available to him. Hillary Clinton and President Bill Clinton taking advantage of the charitable deduction, for example. Much less when you talk about the deductions available, but still plenty of politicians releasing their tax returns. Donald Trump has not, but they often take the deductions available to them. On top of that, she's in Ohio today. She's just picked up a local endorsement there. That of LeBron James, who was beloved by folks at Ohio, then left for a couple of years to head to Miami. Now he's won a championship, and I'd imagine they like him a lot there, too. Again, back to you, Melissa.
There you go. Rich Edson, thank you so much for that.
Activity inside that room. There will be a town hall event that will begin any moment. Apparently about national security and matters with regard to the military and overseas. And Donald Trump will be there, and we will carry it live for you. So stand by. We shall be west of our nation's capital when that event begins.
The reality is he's a genius. What he did was he took advantage of something that could save his enterprise, and he did something we admire in America. He came back.
What it shows is what an absolute mess the federal tax code is, and that's why Donald Trump is the person best positioned to fix it. There's no one who's shown more genius in their way to maneuver around the tax code and to rightfully use the laws.
That's Mayor Rudy Giuliani and Governor Chris Christie reacting in the New York Times, acquiring pages from Donald Trump's tax returns. My next guest has not been on the Trump train, but he is now. Governor John Sununu is former White House Chief of Staff to President H.W. Bush. Sir, thanks for coming on the show. I am going to get to the tax return issue in a second, but I want to start with the fact that you've only recently come on board with Trump. How come?
Well, I made a formal commitment to support Donald Trump. I obviously, historically, I've been saying I'd vote for the nominee, but I want to make it clear that this is a choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton made it awfully easy for me to say I'm supporting Trump now. I think she has drifted so far left. Her favorite surrogates are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, the two most socialist Democrats. And I think a Clinton presidency would push this country down the slippery slope doing so.
Along those lines, I mean, sometimes it's hard to know where she is. You know, she says that she supports President Obama and, was, of course, part of his administration. At the same time, when she makes those comments about the baristas and the basement dwellers and millennials and how, sort of the economy has failed them, she's really saying that the liberal policies of the past 8 years have failed them. So
she has, but she's still so committed to expanding government control of health care. That moves us towards the socialist side. She's so committed towards things like free college education. Well, that moves us that way. And that slippery slope gets bigger and bigger as other people want to get their share of the free pie. And it'll be a disaster. We have to stop that trend.
What do you think of where we are in this campaign cycle? I mean, we started this segment by talking about the few tax documents that were leaked to the New York Times that show Donald Trump following the law. And I don't know how many people volunteered to pay more than they're required to each year. I know I don't. I wouldn't raise my hand to tip the government. But this is kind of where we are in this cycle, the back and forth with the tit for tat. Is that the way? I mean, is it unusual, or is this kind of where we generally are at this point in a presidential election? What's your take?
I think politics have drifted towards that, Melissa. But, I find it interesting. If people want to talk taxes, they should be talking about the tens of thousands of dollars that the Clintons deducted from their taxes to install and to maintain that server. Those deductions don't follow the law. And why aren't we talking about the deductions that don't follow the law rather than the deductions that did follow the law?
There you go. Governor Sununu, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Melissa. Take care.
So we're keeping a close eye. We promise this is going to happen. Herndon, Virginia, expecting to hear from Trump momentarily. Going to talk with a group of retired military officers, and the event has begun. We expect Trump in there anytime. We'll bring that to you live. Plus, a warning from Trump about voter fraud in America come November. Why he's urging his supporters to prevent it. Listen.
I hear too many bad stories, and we can't lose an election because of you know what I'm talking about. So go and vote, and then go check out areas.
Donald Trump's new luxury hotel there, spray painting the phrases, "No justice, no peace," and "Black Lives Matter." A video circulating on social media shows a man writing the words, then walking away. The graffiti has since been covered up with plywood. The Trump International Hotel has only been open for 3 weeks.
Go and vote, and then go check out areas, because a lot of bad things happen, and we don't want to lose for that reason. We don't want to lose, but we don't want to lose for that reason. So go over and watch carefully.
Donald Trump warning that voter fraud could be an issue this election cycle. So much so that, as you heard him, he's asking supporters to monitor the ballot stations. Senior correspondent Eric Shawn's been on this story for every election cycle. You're on voter fraud. Eric, good morning to you.
Yeah,
what do you think about this? What are you learning?
Well, good morning, Bill. You know, when you show up at the polls and your polling place there this time, will likely be more than just election officials keeping tab, and it's a very controversial move. Volunteer poll watchers recruited to look out for any possible problems.
Kathy Mayhall plans to keep an eagle eye on the vote.
We're going to poll watch, or as they say, poll observe.
The Ohio Donald Trump supporter has heeded the call from the Trump campaign to sign up as a poll watcher in Cleveland. The effort, the latest move by political parties and other groups to deploy volunteers to monitor the election.
You get to be inside the precinct election board, and you actually can, in Pennsylvania, you can keep track of everyone that comes in to vote.
In 46 states, private citizens can challenge voter qualifications either on or before Election Day, except in Alabama, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Wyoming. In Ohio, groups like Trump's can observe but not challenge voters. The poll-watching group that has gained the most attention has been the Houston-based True the Vote. In 6 years, it says, thousands of poll watchers have been trained, saying they act properly. But critics have long charged that such citizen efforts can be too aggressive and lead to voter intimidation and suppression.
There's a significant risk of discriminatory conduct.
Wendy Weiser of the Brennan Center for Justice says poll watchers have repeatedly been shown to challenge voters based on race.
It is illegal for people to target voters on a discriminatory basis. It is illegal for people to behave in an intimidating way, and that includes directly confronting voters.
But Kathy says she will do the right thing.
It's a way to just watch what's going on and make sure that everyone gets a chance to vote.
True the Vote says its watchers are prohibited from talking directly to voters to prevent any possible conflicts. As for the Trump campaign, it did not respond to a request for information. Kathy tells me she's waiting for poll training information, too. But she says she is ready to be dispatched at the polls in her key swing state of Ohio.
Wow. Okay, Eric, thank you. Keep an eye on it. Eric Shawn there in our newsroom in New York. Thanks.
Let's talk about all of this with our panel. Joe Trippi is the former campaign manager for Vermont Governor Howard Dean, and Karl Rove, former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to George W. Bush. Both are Fox News contributors. Great to have you both. Karl, you just published a piece on FoxNews.com. Literally, it's being published as we speak right now. And in it, you write, the tax bomb has now exploded. What's the fallout, in your opinion?
Well, I think it depends on how this is litigated over the coming week. I think it's a mistake for the Trump surrogates to go out and say, oh, he's a genius. That suggests that he found some special way to jimmy the tax code to his advantage. I think it'd be better for them just to come forward and say, look, our tax code says if you have losses and you're filing, you can take those losses and use them to offset for future income. Otherwise, we'd have small businesses that were losing money but still having to pay taxes on non-existent profits. So I think they ought to be just sort of straightforward about it and say, of course, he had big losses from casino and other business. He took those in 1995. He could use that to offset for future income. That's the way the tax system is. And anybody who suggests that if you got losses, you ought to pay taxes on them is nuts. And go straight back at her, force her to be heard one way or the other on it.
Joe, if the Trump team is more straightforward about it, do you think this goes away?
No, I don't think it's going to go away. I think I agree with Carl. I think they've totally mishandled it and sort of played right into where the Clinton campaign wants to go, which is, you know, he got this huge, almost $1 billion tax break, and now his tax proposal is to get rid of the estate tax or change the estate tax, which saves his family even more billions. So they're going to keep pushing this and pushing it, and they've got to come up with a better response. I don't think this "he's a genius" thing is helpful right now.
You know, if you look at it, the list of quote-unquote bombshells for both candidates during this election cycle, it's actually insane. I was trying to list some of them. Hillary Clinton, you have the pay-to-play scheme for the foundation. You have questions over a personal server in Benghazi. You have the deplorable comments. You have the fainting episode. For Donald Trump, you have the comments about women, the beauty queen, the apprentice, the tax returns. You have the debate on the birther issue. I mean, we're still several weeks away from the election, Carl, so I wonder how timing comes into this and what else is there out there for either of them.
Well, we don't know, but there's likely to be more. On her side, we're likely to have emails. We're being promised a dump from WikiLeaks. But look, here's the deal. These things are, it depends on how you respond to them. She brought up the Miss Universe candidate, the winner, beauty contest winner during the debate. That would have been gone the next day had not Donald Trump then spent Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and part of Saturday talking about it and defending himself on an issue where that is not consequential, where he doesn't look good, where he only makes himself look bad, and most important of all, chews up valuable time. We're at that point of the campaign where the most valuable asset is time, and he chewed up basically 5 days talking about that sideshow issue instead of prosecuting the case that he stands for change and she represents the status quo. So it's going to be interesting in the remaining days of the campaign, roughly 6 weeks left, 37 days. Going to be interesting to see how they handle the events that intrude into the campaign and whether they have the discipline to force the dialogue back to their main theme, in his case, change, and hers, qualification and experience, and whether they're able to do that.
You know, we want to talk a little bit more about Hillary Clinton, Joe, but I'm also seeing some breaking news from the New York Attorney General's office. This just coming into our newsroom, that the New York Attorney General's office has issued a notice of violation directing the Trump Foundation to cease and desist asking for money in the state of New York. So you have this coming up about his foundation, but of course you have questions about the Clinton Foundation as well. So to Carl's point, here we are 37 days before the election. Anything can still happen. Does any of what we're talking about right now impact the undecided voters 37 days from now?
Oh, absolutely it does, and it's just going to get worse, in my own view. Look, you got two people with huge negative ratings, and at this stage of the game, I don't think either of them are likely to heal very much of the concerns people have about them. And so it's going to be much more likely that the campaign sees on any missteps, anything that comes out like this new report, and to keep forcing the other one off its footing. And Trump seems to fall into that. I mean, that's part of the problem here is they're going to keep throwing out bait, and if he keeps taking it, there's no way he can get back into this campaign. I think you see these polls in Colorado and other places now where it's starting to widen. A lot of it is because of what Carl said. She pushed out on the Miss Universe thing, and he followed up for 4, 5, 6 days, fell right into it. If he takes that bait now and keeps doing that, that is what the Trump campaign's got to guard against.
Well, we'll see how he behaves, also what happens at the debate in Virginia where you are, Joe. Just for a little bit more information from the New York AG's office, apparently they're putting this the cease and desist order into effect because the foundation failed to register with the Charities Bureau and has failed to provide annual financial reports. in an annual audited financial statement. So that's why they're saying you can no longer essentially raise money in New York. I'm going to let this sit for a little bit as we find out more information. Carl, I want to ask you about something that no one's really talking about in relation to politics. And I can't help but think about it because of what happened with Superstorm Sandy. We have Hurricane Nat
with a speech and a Q&A session in Virginia. He touched on cybersecurity, the shrinking size of the military, and health problems facing men and women who have served our country. He did not offer any comment, however, on a report that shows that he lost nearly $1 billion in 1995. Senior national correspondent John Roberts is live in Pueblo, Colorado, where Trump is campaigning later today. John, news just breaking minutes ago about the Trump Foundation. Tell us about that.
Good afternoon to you, Melissa. Yeah, he's got two events here in the Centennial State a little bit later on today. So far today, he has not commented on the tax return issue, though Hillary Clinton commented on it quite a bit, as you saw in that event that she just did. The Trump Foundation. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who we should point out is both a Democrat and a supporter of Hillary Clinton, has been investigating the Trump Foundation and within the last hour issued a cease and desist order to the officers of the Trump Foundation, telling them to stop raising money because, according to Schneiderman, the Trump Foundation lacks the appropriate certification to be collecting monies from the general public in the state of New York City in excess of $25,000 per year. We haven't heard anything from Donald Trump on this just yet, but we did get a statement from the campaign just moments ago. Hope Hicks, the Trump spokesman, saying, quote, while we remain very concerned about the political motives behind AG Schneiderman's investigation, the Trump Foundation nevertheless intends to cooperate fully with the investigation. Because this is an ongoing legal matter, the Trump Foundation will not comment further at this time. Donald Trump, as you can imagine, Melissa, eager to kind of turn around the narrative from what, for all intents and purposes, was a pretty horrible week for the campaign last week, but still running up against these roadblocks that the Clinton campaign and people who are aligned with the Clinton campaign keep throwing it his way. Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. And polls showing that Trump is potentially facing some pretty big problems in Colorado.
Yeah, he is. A new Monmouth poll came out just a short time ago, shows that Donald Trump is trailing Hillary Clinton by 11 points in the Centennial State. She has got 49% to his 38%. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, who polls pretty well here in Colorado, is at 7 points. Now, if you take a look back at July, which was the last Monmouth poll in the state of Colorado, those margins are narrower. She was leading by 13 points back in July. But when you compare it to recent polls that were taken in the states that show the race even up, or Trump even ahead, it would appear that Hillary Clinton has reestablished a lead. What's Donald Trump doing to try to counter this? He's going to be hitting Hillary Clinton later on today on how she and her husband made money after leaving the White House, essentially saying that they were selling access in return for big speaking fees, millions of dollars of which came from big Wall Street banks. And at a veterans event earlier today in Herndon, Virginia, where Donald Trump was talking about cybersecurity, basically saying Hillary Clinton has no credibility on that issue. Listen to what he said.
Hillary Clinton's only experience in cybersecurity involves her criminal scheme to violate federal law, engineering a massive cover-up, and putting the entire nation in harm's way.
But at the same time, Trump taking some heat in the last hour over comments that he made at that event when asked about post-traumatic stress disorder. He said that people in the room who are strong were able to deal with what they saw during war, but others aren't particularly able to deal with it. That was seen by some people, and many of them in the Hillary Clinton campaign, as Trump saying that only weak people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. The campaign released a statement about that shortly ago, Melissa, in which they said that Trump's comments were taken completely out of context. So that's something to watch this afternoon as well to see how that develops.
Boy,
Melissa?
that is a lot of back and forth. I'm glad you're out there staying on top of it for us. Thank you for that. WikiLeaks
Thanks,
founder Julian Assange may be backing down, another wild card in this race. After promising his own October surprise about Hillary Clinton, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is now maybe dialing back the claims he could potentially shake up the presidential race. Why he did it, what evidence he may have, we'll check in on that. Mike Pence and Tim Kaine take the spotlight this week as the vice presidential candidates face off in their one and only debate. We have Fox team coverage. Jennifer Griffin is on the Clinton-Kaine campaign, but we're going to begin with Carl Cameron, who is live in Farmville, Virginia. So, Carl, how has Governor Pence been preparing for tonight?
Vigorously. His aides like to say that from the moment he accepted the running mate's slot in Donald Trump's ticket, that he knew that there would be two important days. One, his convention speech, which of course is off of a teleprompter, and he doesn't have to face any questions or any lip from an opponent. And tomorrow night, the vice presidential debate. It's a one-time off. It'll be the biggest audience he's ever had in his political life. And his preparation for it has included a sparring partner, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who were told behind closed doors in one of those sessions, then they do go the full 90 minutes, and he's been doing them almost daily. At one point, Pence said, well, I'm glad I'm not debating Scott Walker. So apparently, Walker threw a few spitballs at him. There will certainly be plenty of them tomorrow. And one of the things that Mike Pence realizes he has to do is he has to advance Donald Trump's agenda, the policy. And there's been a lot more name-calling than there's been policy in the Trump campaign. And Trump, long ago in his own political career, said he would never get personal and never do personal attacks in American politics, which certainly Donald Trump at the top of the ticket has not been reluctant to do. Don't expect a lot of that. Pence will use policy. When he's asked about some of Trump's statements that have been rhetorically incendiary, he will say, well, what he was discussing was, for instance, immigration, or he was discussing trade. And his criticism of Hillary Clinton will then be repeated. Trump's criticism of Hillary Clinton will then be repeated by Mike Pence, but perhaps not with the same degree of name-calling. There's a lot riding on this. The vice presidential campaign, the vice presidential candidate, is always number two in succession. And both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are older candidates than the country has seen in a long, long time. And there's also the issue of the Senate, because it's in play, and the vice president says has the deciding vote when there are tied votes in the Senate. And if it's Mike Pence, the conservative agenda, and Donald Trump's gets advanced. Obviously, if it's Tim Kaine, from the Pence perspective, that's no help at all.
Good stuff. All reasons to watch. Campaign Carl Cameron, thank you so much. Our team coverage continues with Jennifer Griffin, who is also live in Farmville, Virginia. Jennifer, how is Senator Kaine preparing for the debate tomorrow night?
Well, Melissa, he's taking a page from his running mate's book. He's doing a lot of mock debate sessions. Standing in on the other side is Bob Barnett, a Washington lawyer who has done this for many years for the Clinton campaign. He's taken a few days off the campaign trail for that prep. Now, Kaine has an avowed nice guy image. He has called himself boring on more than one occasion, but this debate tomorrow night is not really between Tim Kaine and Mike Pence and what they stand for. This is about who can smear the top of the ticket. Kaine will come out swinging, likely, about Trump apparently not paying taxes for 18 years. He'll focus on his business failures, 6 bankruptcies, and detailed accounts of small business owners that the campaign has been bringing out on the campaign trail, saying that they had not been paid by Donald Trump. Pence, for his part, won't focus as much on Tim Kaine, who was widely respected in the Senate by his fellow Republicans, but he will hit him hard on Clinton's handling of classified information, private email servers. I would be surprised if he brought up Bill Clinton's sexual past, given that he has shown no inclination to go there. In fact, it was Mike Pence who laid down the law, saying Gennifer Flowers would not be attending the last debate as the campaign's guest at the Hofstra debate. Melissa.
All right. Thank you so much for that. The debate tomorrow will give the VP nominees some much-needed face time. Recent polling shows that 16% of likely voters have never heard of Senator Tim Kaine. 12% don't know who Governor Mike Pence is. Oh, well. 21% have no opinion of Kaine. 14% have no opinion of Pence. Jessica Tarlov is a Democratic pollster and a senior political strategist for Schoen Consulting. Mercedes Schlapp is a GOP strategist and former spokesperson for President George W. Bush. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Jessica, this debate might actually have some substance. These candidates might get down and really talk about the issues. It's a lot less about style. Am I right to hope for this?
No, you're not at all. And I think this is what Americans, or Americans who know that it's happening tomorrow night, are hoping for as well. We've heard a lot of people say, oh, let's just talk about the issues, and now you might get your chance. It'll probably be a little bit less interesting, obviously. No one on the stage will be as colorful as Donald Trump. But I think that we are going to hear about the policies. We're going to hear about records. We're going to hear about, causes that both of these men have fought for through their entire careers.
Mercedes, Mike Pence, he's a very funny guy. Do we have that soundbite? I like when he came out, he introduced himself. Well, he's funny in spite of himself. Let me show you what I mean.
It's a long way from Indiana to New York City. Really. I mean, I like to tell people, he's charismatic, bigger than life, interesting, and then there's, me. Kind of balance the ticket.
90 minutes on stage. There's going to be a great opportunity for the American public to see if this guy can tell the truth. I mean, or maybe if he recognizes the truth.
Okay, so setting aside that a lot of people don't know who those two guys are, when they see them come out, Mercedes, Mike Pence, he's self-effacing, which is not something we've seen a lot of in this campaign. He's likable, another thing that the headliners really miss. Could be interesting to get to know him more.
Well, I have to tell you, in conservative circles, Mike Pence is viewed as he's Reagan-esque. He's just such a strong communicator. He understands how to talk about economic issues, national security. In Indiana alone, he was able to reduce the unemployment rate by more than half. So I really think that Pence has an opportunity to connect to the ordinary American out there, to talk about Trump's economic and national security vision for America. And I think it gives Mike Pence an opportunity to almost reset a bit the campaign after we saw just a very bad week last week for Donald Trump. And let me tell you, this goes back to 2012 when Biden and Ryan had their vice presidential debate. It was Biden who really was able to help President Obama, who really had a very poor first debate against Mitt Romney.
Yeah. Jessica, Tim Kaine is a guy they like to say he's never lost an election. I bet we're going to see the reason why.
Yeah, no, I think so. He's a very skilled politician, but he's also a really genuine guy. As you mentioned in the introduction, nobody dislikes Tim Kaine. I remember the day that it came out that he was going to be VP. I believe it was Jeff Flake tweeted, trying to think of something mean to say about this guy, but I just can't. Congratulations to Tim Kaine. So you're going to see that. I think he may speak in Spanish a little bit, talk about his son's military service. To Mercedes' point, conservatives do love Mike Pence for obvious reasons, but I think Tim Kaine's going to be hitting him on a lot of those issues, the conservative agenda points, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act specifically, talking about how anti-choice he's been, anti-Planned Parenthood, doesn't want to raise the minimum wage and issues like that. But that will help enormously to shore up conservative.
So wait, hang on. Before we devolve into this, let me ask you, Mercedes, when one of them gets out there and they express an opinion or a stance, is it right to assume that that is the position for the whole ticket? Is that fair? Because there's a lot of distance between Mike Pence and Donald Trump on a normal day.
Well, I think for Mike Pence, his job is to support Donald Trump's vision. I think they're very much in line about the fact of tax reform, cutting taxes, cutting regulations, which we know are strangling businesses. And so it gives an opportunity to talk about how are we going to create economic growth in America. I think you're going to see more of a substantive policy in talk, basically. You're also going to be talking about trade. So I think for the question for Tim Kaine is that he supports this he increased taxes while he was Virginian governor over, $4 billion. He's going to have to defend himself on this big tax, big spending, extreme type of policy, and really just very much cozy with the Wall Street.
I don't think that's
we gotta go. You both answered twice. It was fair and balanced. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right. The first Monday in